Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and you and yours are all healthy. This is a challenging time, but it's wonderful to see everybody. And we're going to be creative and innovative at this time. And we all care so deeply about you, and we're thrilled to see you. I'm Rebecca Gold, and I'd like to welcome you to the third in our series of virtual lectures from Israel. At Federation, we've been focused on making sure our Greater Metro West community members stay safe and feel supported during these uncertain times. It's wonderful to see everyone. This includes our Federation Board approving up to $1 million to address COVID-19 emergency needs locally in Israel and around the world. Recently, we allocated $50,000 to our global partners, JDC, the Joint Distribution Committee, and JAFI, Jewish Agency for Israel, for emergency food supplies for elderly Jews, especially Shoah Holocaust survivors, in Israel and in the former Soviet Union. We also sent an additional $20,000 to our partners in Ofakim and Rishon LeZion, Israel, for Passover food packages. At the same time, we also want to ensure that we don't let other important things pass us by, including Yom Ha'atzmaut, celebrating Israel, especially since Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day, is next week on April 29th. Those of you who attended the community mission to Israel in 2018 know how outstanding these speakers are. The tour guides were the piece de resistance of our trip. Today's speaker is Shaya Love, my tour guide from Bus 5, whose topic is Israeli World Traveler, 46 countries visited. For the past 10 years, Shaya has been working as a tour guide, and for 2 years in between, he was a geography and Bible teacher in the conservative kibbutz Keturah, located near Eilat. These days, he lives in Jerusalem with his wife, his 5-month-old daughter, Carmel, who is beautiful. We're going to see her later, and his amazing 3-legged dog, Bagheera. In his spare time, he enjoys reading, playing soccer, squash, extreme sports, and hiking in Israel around the world, even with the baby. Shaya will speak for about 35 minutes. He will answer questions twice, once in the middle of his talk and then again at the end. If at any time you have a question for Shaya, please click on the chat feature on your screen and we will collect the questions to ask him. Or you can use the raise your hand feature so we can call on you to ask a question. And just so you know, if you go to participants, there'll be a raise your hand there. It's not in the chat section. You have to go to participants. We will get to as many questions as we can before we close the program at 1 p.m. We have muted everyone, which is a very unnatural state for Jewish people to be muted at all. Please leave yourself muted for the duration of the call so we can hear our speakers well. Enjoy the presentation and welcome Shaya. It's so great to have you here with us today. Go Bus 5.
Thank you so much.
Chamesh.
Bus 5. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Shaya Lav. I was the tour guide of Bus 5 last time you got into Israel. And I really was excited for you coming over like around now, but it doesn't happen. And they contacted us and they said, hey, we want you to give a lecture. So I wanted to take an opportunity to talk a little bit about something that is unique for the culture. I do want to share with you something a little bit before we dive into the topic, is how is life now here in Israel? Because everyone is stuck in their own house. All we know is just from the news. So what you guys know today about Israel is what you see in the news, but is it true, is it not? What's going on? So generally today in Israel, most people are at home. Slowly, we're starting to get back to work, not tour guides. It's gonna take some time until we get back to work, but People start to go to work, stores are starting to open, but the big major thing that's coming up is Memorial and Independence Day, that the government decided that everything is going to be shut down and closed. Now, it does make sense, but it's still hard to hear that the graveyards are going to be closed. You know, it's like, we don't want to go and say hi to everyone and do barbecues in the graveyards. We just want to visit our beloved ones. And that's going to be closed because of the situation. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see. Yet there is something good about staying at home at those days. For example, on the holiday, I was listening to a Holocaust survivor via Zoom, and there were about 300 people listen to the Holocaust survivor, which usually would be hard to do, but everyone was able to take part in it. We're starting to see the light. We're starting to see how things are changing, and we're praying for everything to become a little bit better. This topic today is going to be a little bit about I need to share screen. Share screen. Here we go. Okay. We're going to be talking a little bit about Israeli backpackers. Now, the title was Israeli Traveler, and was a little bit about me because I like traveling, but that's going to be the second part of the conversation. The first part is going to be a little bit about what is Israeli backpackers? Is there such a thing as Israeli backpackers? Now, why even talk about Israeli backpackers is because when you guys and when anyone comes to Israel, they want to learn a little bit about Israeli culture. They want to taste the food. They want to see the historical places. They want to see the religious places. They want to meet the people. They want to meet the minorities, the locals. But those you don't meet are the ones who are not in Israel. And we have a lot of people around the world. We actually have so many people traveling the world that one time when I was in India, I met this Indian guy, and he comes up to me and he asks me, excuse me, sir, how many people live in Israel? And I told him, you know, about 8 million. And he started laughing and he says, no, not how many Israelis are visiting now India. How many Israelis live in Israel? And it took me a second, and I was like, whoa, he thinks that there's so many Israelis because we come, so many of us visit India, that he thinks there's millions and millions of us, while there's only 8 million. So we're going to be talking a little bit about backpacking, Israeli backpackers. The major thing we're going to be talking about is the post-army one. And we're going to dive a little bit into that. And in between, I'm going to put some of my personal stories traveling, and everyone has their own personal stories doing so. So let us begin. So each and every one of you has traveled probably the world somewhere, and maybe in the chat you can answer maybe, what's the most remote place you've ever traveled to? Might be an island, might be a beach somewhere, deserted, I don't know, mountain, desert, Sahara, Africa, I don't know. Second question might be, did you meet any Israelis traveling to those remote places? I see some people are starting to answer, but people are going to remote places, and Israelis like to go and travel to different places. In the picture, what you see is a present my wife made me. Says, I haven't been everywhere, but it's on my list, which kind of resembles a lot of Israelis, not all of them, but resembles me, represents me. And it's a scratching map. So every country I visited, I go over and I scratch it. It's hard to see, but there's about 46 of those around, which means you collect a lot of stories while you travel the world, and people you meet and cultures you meet. And I end up meeting Israelis in almost every country. And trust me, I go to really, really remote places, remote mountains, remote countries. I maybe talk about it later, but I was a teacher in Kyrgyzstan, just as an example, okay? And it happens. So people come from all over the world to visit Israel, but we like to go and visit also all the world. Now we're all stuck at home. Where would be the next place you guys would want to go to? Now I know you want to say Israel, but let's say not Israel, because you were supposed to be now in Israel, but where would be the next place you want to go to? The next dream? Beach, forests, mountains, skiing maybe? Where do you want to go? By the way, all the pictures that we see in the presentation are pictures that I took, except for maybe one, in different places around the world. The first one I've been asked, this one, it's actually not in Israel, even though it looks like it, actually doesn't, but this is in Argentina. It's a 4-day trek, and the lady you see trekking here in the picture is at the time she was my girlfriend, today she's my wife. Don't know why she married me after I took her hiking these mountains. It was terrible. She cursed me the whole way. Okay. So this picture, anyone knows, by the way? I'll give you a hint. It's in your continent. This is Twin Falls in Idaho. Okay, I stopped there on the way to Yellowstone. I went hiking around Yellowstone area. Okay, so that was a little bit of an opening just for us to see. We all like to travel. Now, the question is, why do we like to travel? And are Israelis that are traveling after the army any different? Okay, so a little bit of basic terms when we're talking a little bit about backpackers. This picture, by the way, in Arizona, a place called The Wave. Amazing place. Mochila in Spanish means a bag in Spanish, or a big backpack, which the Israelis love to carry on their backpacks. Mochileros, mainly for the backpackers who go to South America, but it's kind of like a term that we use sometimes, is long-term budget backpackers. Now, this is important to understand because when we're talking about budget backpackers, we're talking about people that are trying to save money while traveling. So they're not staying in luxury places, they're not staying in resorts, they're staying in these really small places. I wanted to say dirty, but it depends which backpackers. I've had moments that I slept in storage areas of houses and different things like that. We stay in guest houses, in dorms, the whole shebang. And it's important because we see it as part of the experience. Even if we have the money to travel nicer and more luxurious, we actually enjoy traveling in the budget way. When we say long-term, what do we mean? We mean about 3 to 12 months, okay? Now, 3 months is considered in a way a short backpacking trip. 12 months is considered kind of long, but some people might do it for 2 years, 3 years even, but I would say the majority are 3 to 12 months, and this is the vast majority of them. Some do half a year, some do more. By the way, not only after the army. So today we have a lot of people traveling after the army. We'll talk about it, but it's not only after the army. We have today people going pre-army for a short trip, like a month. Oh, before I go to the army, I need to go traveling the world. Or after the first degree, after the second degree, the bachelor's and the master's degree, people want to go out traveling. Me and my wife just got back what we called a baby moon. We gave birth about 5 months ago, and we went traveling for a month in Philadelphia, Puerto Rico, and Paris for a month. We just came back from our baby moon. Okay. Now, the next line, that it's almost considered a rite of passage, is very important, because the reality today in Israel is when someone is in the army, people don't ask him, are you going, or what are you doing after the army? Are you going to go on a trip after the army? The question is, where are you going to go after the army? Now, most people, we're going to talk about in a moment, divide between two main areas, but it's almost considered a rite of passage. It's part of the life. You go to elementary school, you go to high school, after high school to the army, and or maybe pre-programmed, after programs and stuff like that. But then you go on the big trip, the long trip. And today it's almost like you have to go. You feel bad if you don't go. People might ask you, so where are you planning to go after the army? And if someone answers, oh, I want to go to college, people will be like, what? Why? Go explore the world. This is your time. So maybe a question, a heads up of a question that we're going to need to talk about is why? Why do we have to go traveling? Now, I know that you all think it's because of the army. I want to say today that it's not only because of the army. The average age of the Israeli backpackers is around 22, 23, but today, again, you see already waves of Israelis around their 30s. There is even a wave of 40s. And today I even see parents of children that are going traveling that are enjoying to join their children in the backpacking. But usually when your parents join you in your long trip, that's the fun part because they take you to a nicer hotel and nicer restaurants, so you actually get to eat a little bit more. Okay? So Israeli backpacking, really, is that a thing? Is it different than other backpackers? It's part of what we're going to be talking about. This picture is from Guatemala, from San Pedro. These are volcanoes right around the lake. So some of the questions we're going to be talking about today: why do so many Israelis travel? Makes sense, smart question. When did it start? Because in 1948, Israelis didn't go traveling the world. 1950s didn't go traveling the world. So when did it actually start? How did it become a thing that you have to go? We had to go to the army since the beginning of Israel, but we didn't always go traveling after the army. So we take it for granted today, but when did it start? Why did it start? And it's a very serious part of the culture today. Where do we go? Okay, is there, a very unique place that we go to, or two of those, or maybe we just go wherever we want to go, or something like that? That's an important question. What do we, the mochileros, do all day? So we go, okay, let's say I went traveling, I went to India, I got to India, and I'm going to be 1 year in India. What do you do every day? You just sit around, you just walk around. What do you do all day and every day? It's going to be part of what we need to understand. What is the personal influence in each person traveling when you go on a long trip like that? Okay, there's a lot of things that influence you while you're traveling. And when you go back to Israel, okay, all those people traveling the world, then coming back to Israel, how do the mochileros change Israeli culture today? Okay, because if there's so many people coming from all over the world and coming back, this is a very serious question to ask. I might, never mind. I wanted to relate to like people coming to visit Israel and how does it change you? It's not exactly the same. Okay, so let's start. Where do we actually travel to? So most Israelis, in average, about 50,000 Israelis go traveling the world each year. The majority actually go to the Far East. When we say the Far East, we mean India, Thailand. India and Thailand are the majority, I would say, and then there's Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, those around that area. That would be the majority. Okay, here we have a little pie. Now the pie is a little bit confusing because we have two blues. The darker blue, the big chunk, that would be the Far East, India, Thailand, and all that. It's a little bit confusing. The orange one is South America. So the two major ones are India and South America. The other ones, you guys can see, we have a little bit of Europe, Africa, and North America, different places. These would be more adventurous or the opposite, ones who don't want to go to those places. I can tell you personally, I didn't go to any of these, okay, because I wanted to feel special. I didn't want to go where everyone goes, so I went traveling. I bought a one-way ticket to Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, those countries. That was my big trip. Crazy stories traveling those places. People come and ask, where do you want to go? How do you choose? Do I want to go to the Far East or do I want to go to South America? Rule of thumb about that, very easy, not totally accurate, but still easy to understand, is if you're going to South America, you're more interested in backpacking, trekking, mountains. Maybe you're in love with the Spanish language. That happens a lot. And if you want to go to India, you're more interested, I would say, in laid back beaches, things like that. That would be more to the Far East and different things like that in the culture of India and the vibes of India, which we'll mention a little bit later. So why do so many Israelis travel? When did it start? And how are Israeli travelers different? This picture, by the way, was taken also in Guatemala. I actually slept in my not my backpack, my sleeping bag right here, and I woke up in the morning and I jumped into the lake. It's warm water, really, really amazing. It's North Guatemala. So why do so many Israelis travel? Now, the first answer that jumps to your mind is because of the army, which is correct. But I want to mention something that also has to do with it, especially today. In Israel, when we go to school, we're obligated, the schools are obligated, when I was a teacher, we're obligated to take the children outside, to go hiking in nature. At least 5 days a year that you have to go traveling, going on hiking places, or maybe museums or things like that. Not everyone loves it. I used to be a tour guide for Israelis. They like to complain. Why are we here? Why are we hiking? What are we going to do? Not all of them. Some like it, some hate it. But if you do it every year, since grade 1 till 12th grade, it changes the way that you behave. You're okay with nature. You're okay with hiking. You're okay with sleeping outside. You're okay with not being at home. So that's already part of the culture. Second, because of the army. When we go to the army, it's not only the army. We go to school, we go to high school, same as everyone else, but then we go to the army. So if until now we were in programs that tell us what to do, now we go to the army, and it's not only they tell us what to do, they tell us what to wear, which haircut to get, and all of that kind of stuff. So when you finish the army, you don't want to go straight into another program. Because if you think about it for a moment, until now, you were never really a grown-up. Even in the army, yes, they give you a gun. Yes, you can drive a tank. Yes, you're in charge of computers, or maybe you're a commander, but you're not really a grown-up. People are telling you what to do, and you do what they tell you to do. Okay, so you're just executing the missions that they give you. But when you finish, now, suddenly, your parents are not going to tell you what to do anymore. They usually don't tell you before that here in Israel, but now you can do whatever you want. Hey, what do I want to do? I don't know what I want to do. What do I want to study in college? I don't know. So we go exploring the world. We go traveling the world, and then we start asking big questions. What do I want to do in life? For me, my question was, do I want to be religious? Because I grew up religious, and I went traveling on my own in Kyrgyzstan because no one knew me there. So no one knew me. No one knew what being Jewish is. No one knew what Israelis are. And that way I could really behave whatever way I want. You know, if I want to eat not kosher, I can eat not kosher. Okay, so that way I can really deal with myself in that aspect. So when Israelis go traveling, they go exploring. They're exploring not only the world, but they're actually exploring themselves. They're exploring what are their desires, what are their needs, what do they want to do. Okay. I understand we need to have a question break. So after this, I'm going to finish for a question break. Okay. When did it start? Now, this is really interesting because researchers actually say that the big change in the 60s, we had a few Israelis going around the world. In the beginning of the 70s, only a few, but until the end of the 70s, the beginning of the 80s, suddenly there were waves of Israelis going. What happened in the early 70s that changed everything? 1973 Yom Kippur War. Yom Kippur War changed a lot of things in Israel. It changed the way people behave. It changed the way people see war, war and army. And it changed also the way people deal with trauma. They didn't know what to do with it. This was a big trauma for everyone. So suddenly they had to go traveling to go to somewhere that they don't deal with the trauma on a daily basis. Okay, a dear friend of mine who lives now in Philadelphia had to leave Israel. And when I went over to Philadelphia and I visited him and asked him why, he said, my wife, brother was killed in a terrorist attack. And whenever she goes anywhere in Israel, she feels it, she sees it, she's in trauma. I had to go to somewhere where they don't check your backpack when you enter a restaurant or a mall. We had to go somewhere else. So after 1973, people were in shock. They had to go somewhere to clear their minds, to clear their soul. They didn't even know about it, okay? Someone mentioned yesterday when we had the pre-talk, for her, heroes fly. I don't remember how you exactly translated it into English, but there is a series. I don't think it's on Netflix, might be on Amazon Prime or something. For her, heroes fly, which kind of talks a little bit more about the Israeli backpackers and the Israeli mochileros, which are the Israeli backpackers, okay? Last, and then we're gonna go to questions. How are Israeli travelers different? One, they like to travel in packs, okay? 4 people at a time, 5 people, 10 times, they like to travel in chunks. So when I go traveling somewhere, I don't know, I'm in Colombia and I'm walking the street in Colombia and I see a bunch of 4 people they don't look alike because each one looks different. One is Ashkenazi, one is Sephardic, one is Yemenite, one is Ethiopian. I'm like, oh, that's a group of Israelis. Okay, usually if I see two people that are tall and blonde, I'm like, oh, these are Germans. Okay, but when you see people that are not, they don't look alike, and they're all together, usually if it's cold, they all have this black jacket and they wear jeans, kind of walking around. But they like to travel in packs. How come? Because we understand each other in our culture. We understand what it means. Where have you been to the army? Oh, I've been to Golani. Oh, I know everything about you. Where are you from? I'm from Tel Aviv. Oh, okay, so I know. And we always know kind of like, oh, so you know this guy, you know that guy. And we kind of like get to be together and get to be traveling together. Not only that, but you might have noticed that if you've been to Israel before, not all the Israelis have great English, which means that it's easier to speak in Hebrew. So when sometimes we meet other travelers, we actually speak to them in English, but if you're 4 Israelis and one, I don't know, Austrian guy that joined us or one Dutch guy, they tend to go back to Hebrew, which kind of a shame, but they tend to travel in packs. They tend to go to the same places, same recommendations, same hostels. So much so, and this is another term I should have put at the beginning, there's something called the Hummus Trail. What's the Hummus Trail? The Hummus Trail are all the places that the Israelis go to when they go traveling in South America or in India. That would be the must-go places, which means when you're going to go to those places, you're going to have menus in the restaurant that are going to be in Hebrew. You're going to have people, locals, who speak fluent, great, no accent Hebrew, because there's so many Israelis that go to those places since the late 70s. Okay, they've been going to those places all the time. So we have something called the Hummus Trail. The reason they call it the Hummus Trail is not only because so many Israelis go there, because so many Israelis go there, the restaurants already hummus. So you can buy pitas and hummus and Israeli breakfast, and they actually have Israeli menus, not only in Hebrew, but Israeli food like falafel and schnitzel and things like that that the Israelis like to eat. Kind of funny. And then it depends which kind of traveler you are, the one that likes to go to those kind of places or the one that wants to go, no, I don't want to go to those places. I want to go to the unique local ones. Okay. So before we go to the next slide, there is some questions. How does this go? Am I continuing?
I know, I'm laughing too.
Okay, now everyone is unmuted suddenly.
Okay, I think we can continue, Shaya. So no question, but
Okay,
if
so
you have question,
let's do it that way. If someone sends you a question, just send it to me on thing. Okay.
Great.
Okay, we're continuing. What do mochileros do all day? So this is kind of a picture that kind of shows what's happening. Okay, let's see if you can find me. I'm somewhere in there. My wife is also somewhere in there, and I had to admit I had a better picture that my wife didn't allow me to put up. Okay, because the second picture was a few hours after this, when we already had too much to drink and all that, and the party started. Boom. So what do Israelis do all day? Basically, there's 5 things that they're looking for: sun, sand, secret sex, and stimulants. What am I mentioning by saying that? Sun, we all understand. Not everyone is looking for sun, but again, some do. We want to go to the beaches. We want to enjoy ourselves. This is in Thailand. This picture was taken in Thailand when you go like on a cruise to see all those things. And these are all Israelis that I had never met before. And just on that day, I said, okay, let's go on this cruise. And then you go on the cruise and it becomes to be like a booze cruise and snorkeling and all that. Okay. Sand, same idea, beaches and all that. But not everyone is looking for that. Some are looking for secrets. What do I mean by secrets? We like to go to places that we think that no one else has gone before. Okay. Kind of like Star Trek. Okay. To explore the unexplored where no man has gone before. I'm judging the Enterprise again, all 7 seasons. The commitment, Corona time. I can watch Star Trek. Okay, so they want to go exploring places that no one has gone before. They want to meet some locals. They want to explore themselves, maybe learn a few things about themselves on the way in different ways. Sex, don't need to explain, makes sense not only between Israelis, but also with other backpackers. Not so much with the locals, depends in what country, okay? And when I say stimulants, it includes inside, on one hand, drugs, stuff that gets you excited and things like that. On the other hand, extreme sports, bungee, skydiving, diving underwater, jeep riding, ATVing, feeling like, oh, I'm alive, you know. And remember, everyone after the army, they think we're invincible. Nothing can happen to us, okay? And later on, we're gonna understand that that's part of the reason when bad things happen. Oh, sorry. Okay.
So we have one question from
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
So
You hear me?
Peter? Yeah, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay, so what's the typical cost of this extravagant travel?
Oh, good question. So you remember at the beginning we said budget? Obviously, it depends on how many months you're traveling to. After the Israelis, they get a little sum from the army. Usually they would work for about 3, 4, 5, 6 months before the trip to save money for the trip, and then they would go. I would say, depends which country, depends how you go, but an average trip for, let's say, a 4 months trip would be about $10,000, okay? So it sounds not a lot, but when you're working minimum wage sometimes, the army, that's all the money you have. So people actually all the money they have in the bank and they go back with zero. It depends on how you travel. Today, for an example, I'm a little bit older, I have a daughter, I travel a little bit more expensive. But for you to understand, when you go to India, people don't pay more than $10 a night to sleep, okay? $10 a night would be a decent one. If you pay $20 a night in India as a backpacker, you're staying in luxury, okay? People are staying in like really cheap places. They would go and eat the local food. They would save money in those places, and then they would go and spend the money in other experiences like bungeeing and like flying. So the most expensive part would be the flight usually, and then the layover places, actually so much so to the point where a lot of Israelis nowadays would do couch surfing. If you don't know what couch surfing is, it's like a social media for hosting travelers around the world. And you get to sleep in someone's couch in someone's house. Okay, so it's a good question, and it kind of changes. And sometimes you would cut your trip short because your money's done, and sometimes be actually you'll go into minus and continue traveling because you have to, or you would work while traveling. You'll stop in a hostel and start working. Okay, so I hope that answered the question. A little bit of trekking. So this is the part I chose to put this one up here. This picture is taken in Norway, in the Trolltunga. That's me sitting out there on the cliff. Gorgeous place. Norway is just mind-blowing, okay? The views in Norway, it ruins your traveling anywhere else around the world because the views are just breathtaking, so much so. Trekking, Israelis, they like to go trekking. Not everyone, obviously, but when you go to South America or when you go to Nepal, people like to go trekking. You would go for a week or 2 weeks of going out into nature, sleeping in huts or tents, carrying the gear on your backpack, or taking like a local that brings donkeys and carries your weight for you. But actually going and clearing your mind and going to see nature and going to see the views, talking to people on the way, being off the grid, it's a thing. It's a thing, and you meet a lot of people on the way. I would say the people you meet the most for us as Israelis, after Israelis, because Israelis, it's easy for us to notice them and to kind of pick up on them, would be Germans. This is not a research, this is my personal experience, but tons of Germans are traveling. But the difference would be, again, that the Israelis will be usually 4, 5, 6. The Germans will be 1 or 2. So when Israelis actually each other while trekking, they'll be like, hi, how you doing, where are you from? The Germans, actually, it's funny, but they would hear someone else speaking in German, they would suddenly become silent because they don't want to have this awkward moment of You know, it's like, oh, you're also German. Oh, you're also German. It's kind of like that. Okay, and this is something I've noticed more than once. So trekking is an important part. Extreme sports. This was my motorcycle in India and sleeping up. This is in the Himalayas, right on the border between Nepal and India, up there. People like to take motorcycles. They like to buy cars, vans, maybe just walking for days and days and days. And you go on a motorcycle and you cross country. I had a motorcycle in India. I bought a motorcycle in Mongolia. I visited Mongolia twice. I had a motorcycle in Guatemala. We enjoy doing that, feeling I'm independent. I don't need to have public transportation. And you just go exploring wherever you want. And it's a true freedom to feel on a motorcycle. The problem with extreme is that a lot of times Israelis who don't know to drive a motorcycle buy a motorcycle. Israelis who don't know backpacking might go, and if you see in this picture, you can see the snow on the top. They would try to go to the peak of the mountain, but Israelis have no idea how to walk on snow and how to trek on snow and how dangerous it is. And sometimes things do happen, and I have a few friends that on motorcycles, for example, had motorcycle accidents and had to go back to Israel, which is kind of interesting because I remember when I got to North India, I went into the Chabad house and there was a sign on the door saying, "We need your help. This and this guy had a motorcycle accident and is now in the hospital. We're looking for volunteers to be with them in the hospital." Now, that's also something that's unique for Israeli travelers is, and then I see the list, and the list actually is full. And then they had to put another page to fill up more volunteers to actually go and be with that guy in the hospital. Now, people don't know who that guy is, but suddenly they see someone in need and they would say, yeah, I'll do it. I'll go. I'll be with him in the hospital, help him out. And they tend to help each other out while traveling as well. Okay, so extreme is a very serious part, including all the skydiving and bungee jumping and all those kinds that Israelis love to do. Nature, this picture was taken in Mongolia. Nature, they love to see other kinds of nature. It's really small. We do have a lot of kinds of nature, and tour guides love saying, oh, we're small, but we have deserts and mountains and forests and oceans, but our mountains are nothing like the Himalayas. Our deserts are nothing like the Sahara, which I went to last year in Morocco, which is gorgeous. So we like to see different things, different animals, different kinds of nature, obviously, and the locals. This is in the slums of India. If anyone here remembers Slumdog Millionaire. Yes, Slumdog Millionaire. That's exactly where that is. Now, usually people who travel don't start walking around into the small alleyways in the slums. I might be stupid, I might be crazy, I might be brave, but I like it. I like going to those places to meet the real locals, and they appreciate it. And they start playing around with me. So you can see we're playing ping pong in a very local, basic thing. But that's where you meet the real people, and they invite for dinner, and you end up sleeping in people's houses. Really, really interesting, okay? What is the personal influence of a long trip? I'm gonna leave that question a little bit open and let you think about it, but maybe at the end I'll tell you my personal experience. I can tell you that it's a life changer, a game changer. You never come back the way you are. This picture is in Mongolia, by the way. Now, you never come the way you are. Personally, I went to the trip when I was religious and I came back not religious because I saw the world suddenly, okay? A little bit about the dark side of the big trip. What are the bad things about backpacking the Israeli style way? Drugs, cults, extreme hiking, and prostitution. Now, prostitution leave aside because it's a very, very small minority in very specific places like might be in Thailand and Colombia, where some people might do places where they have prostitution and all that. So I would leave that aside because that's not a main thing, but it is part of the dark side of it. Because it's not something we meet in Israel. Many people go there and they're like, what do I do with that? Can I go? Should I go? Should I not go? Is it okay? Is it bad? Okay, so it's something that suddenly they need to deal with. Drugs, very, very important because I might say, it's not all, but all of the Israelis around the world, about 90% of them will be using drugs. okay? And a lot of times people use things, they don't know what it is. It's the first time they use it. They might take amounts that they're not used to. The first time they're taking shrooms or acid or DMT or different things like that, and it flips them. Some people have the tendency and it flips them. And you can see a lot of people would need to come back to Israel because of it. And we actually have institutions in Israel, 2 institutions that are meant just for Israeli post-army backpackers who flipped from using drugs abroad. And they would come back to Israel and they would go to those institutions for rehabilitation from what happened to them from using drugs, okay? The one drug that they won't use would be heroin, and because that's considered like a bad drug. But all the rest would be like, interesting, let's give it a try, okay? Personally, I can, for an example, give you an example, not only about the weed and Javas, but in South America, me and my wife did the ayahuasca ceremony of the cacti that you drink it and the whole night with a shaman and the whole thing. So it's not only about, ooh, I want to try drugs, but I want to experience the culture. So we went through the whole shaman thing. Extreme hiking, I've mentioned this before. Sometimes people disappear. Sometimes bad things happen to Israelis that are traveling. In the picture, a dear friend of mine that grew up with me and was traveling with me, who, this is a picture where we're together in Kyrgyzstan, later on in India, disappeared. They didn't find him. But what's interesting and unique for Israeli travelers is when someone suddenly disappears, everyone around that area, all the Israeli backpackers in North India, stopped traveling and started going searching for him. Now, when an American backpacker or a German backpacker disappears, nothing happens. He just disappears. When an Israeli one, for 5 years, they continued sending rescue missions to look for him until they discovered in jail that some guy murdered him, okay? Okay, so a little bit about my personal adventure. How did I get hooked up with traveling, and why is there Disney pictures, Disney World, what's going on? So you know how you guys send your children on your bar mitzvah trip to Israel? I was sent on my bar mitzvah trip to Disney World. That was my first trip traveling abroad. We have 7 siblings who don't have a lot of money traveling the world. So my grandparents, which live in Philadelphia, brought us over to the US. And for me, it was like, oh my God, I'm going to Disney World and all that. So as you can see here in the honeymoon, I took my wife also. I was like, you have to come with me to Disney World. It's mind blowing. We had a great time. We did 9 days in all the parks. Okay, so it was very, very intense. I understand I kind of need to rush through this because I kind of took too much time. Obviously, Egypt, pyramids, and all that. I started traveling after the army to nearby countries like Egypt and Jordan, and then I went on a long trip to Kyrgyzstan. Now, why is there a picture of children sitting here? This is actually a school in Kyrgyzstan, and after I landed in Kyrgyzstan, after 2 weeks in Kyrgyzstan, I went to the Jewish local school just to say hi, and I was with them in the Seder night. And the principal of the school asked me, hey, do you want to be a teacher here? I was like, well, I didn't plan on it, but why not? And I told him, okay, so when do I start? And he says, oh, in 15 minutes, you go into class. I was like, wait, what am I going to teach them? You know, I don't speak Russian. And he was like, oh, they're children, you'll be fine. And I went into class, and this is my class, and I became a Judaism teacher in Kyrgyzstan for 3 months without knowing the language. How interesting is that? So I actually picked up Russian on the way. I didn't put a picture of the board, but I actually wrote down my name for the first time in Russian. So that really, really interesting. Jumping many countries forward. This picture is actually me jumping in a waterfall. Now, why is this picture very, very important? Is because this picture was taken by a beautiful, beautiful lady that thought that the guy jumping was very cute in Cuba. So we were traveling in Cuba, and my wife today was sitting on the side of the pool, traveling alone, and I was traveling alone, and we didn't see each other, and she saw me jumping off the cliff, and she took a picture of me before we even met. That's me and my wife. We continued traveling for the next 6 months together. This was 4 years ago. So this was already many countries after me traveling. This is us after 2 weeks traveling together, already buying tickets from Cuba to Jamaica. So very, very interesting. Then we traveled to Morocco. Probably in Morocco, we made a baby. And That's us in the Hina ceremony, a Yemenite Hina ceremony, because my wife is Yemenite. That's her grandfather, who was one of the commanders of the Exodus boat that we're taking a picture with. He's Polish. She's half Yemenite and half Polish, so he's Polish. And that's a traditional Yemenite ceremony that took place a week before the wedding. And us today, me, my wife, the baby, and the three-legged dog taking pictures. Maybe the one thing I didn't get to talk about, really interesting, is my experiences with the Jewish world wide, just going everywhere around the world, including my first Reform experience, for example, in Miami. I went to Temple Judea for Yom Kippur service. As a person who grew up Orthodox in Israel, that blew my mind. It was very different than what I'm used to today. So it opens my mind. It's really interesting. That's a graveyard in Morocco, a synagogue in Morocco, and maybe to sum things up, what did I learn from all my travels and all that? First of all, I'm not the center of the universe, and Israel is not the center of the universe, even though as tour guides like to say it is. It's not. And there's so much going on around the world. So it kind of teaches you a little bit of perspective about your life and about other people's life. And for all Israelis, when they actually come back, it teaches you a little bit of humility, okay? People in poor countries are happy. I was in Kyrgyzstan and the people every night invited me to sleep over in their houses, barely having anything to feed me. And when I said no, they would be offended. People are happy also in poor countries, which always brings me to think about what makes you happy. Okay, because obviously money doesn't make you happy. It might be easier, but it doesn't. So it's really interesting traveling the world and seeing other cultures and seeing how they deal with what's hard for them. For me, I learned I'm not a city person, even though today I live in Jerusalem. Whenever I'm in cities, I'm like, oh, I want to go back home. I leave the city, I'm like, oh, this trip is awesome. Israelis watch each other back, so I give you a few stories about that. Traveling opens your mind. Obviously, it changes who you are. So much so that I remember when I came back from my first big trip, I came back and I didn't want to date anyone who didn't go traveling the world, okay? If someone was like, oh, I want you to meet this girl, but she never traveled before, I would say no, because it changes your set of mind the way you are. And obviously Jews all over the world are connected, because when I go to Morocco and I go to the synagogue, I'm invited for dinner. When I go traveling anywhere around the world, I have like a safety net that I know worst case scenario, and I'm not adding into those kind of stories, but I have a few stories like that. I was hosted in Kyrgyzstan by a Jewish guy in a village in the middle of nowhere, just because he was Jewish and I was Jewish, and we did like a matzah mini Seder night, something like that. In Jamaica, I went to the synagogue, which is also on the floor, really interesting. And suddenly I became part of the local community, and I was invited to people, and you get to meet the locals. So it's really, really interesting. This is where I'm finishing. Okay.
Thank you very, very much for
You're
really
welcome.
great. And we have a couple of questions before we go back to Rebecca. The first one was in the chat. What's your next trip planned?
My next trip planned. So now Una and me not having a job, it might be Jordan or Egypt. It's nearby and easy to go to and cheap. Even though I've been to, my wife hasn't been to both of them. So maybe like the easy Petra, that kind of stuff. Or we were thinking about Cyprus, because it's also nearby and cheap to go to until business starts coming back in, because my wife is an artist and we have a business in art, and also that it has stopped as well. So something nearby, probably shorter and cheaper, not one of the New Zealand ones that we want to go to.
Thank you. And the next question from Peter.
Hi. So multi-question question. With the pandemic, are you constrained from visiting some sites? With an Israeli passport, are you constrained? Are you inhibited personally from going to certain dangerous countries at all, that maybe Muslim countries that could look on you with a question, or war zones?
Good question. First of all, war zones I don't go to. I try to be a smart traveler, which means I check before I go, and each country has places you don't want to go to. I would even tell you that in America, there are some neighborhoods I wouldn't go to. So I try to check places before I go to where should I go and where shouldn't I go. So you can go to Africa. Africa is actually safe, but depends where you go. Israel is dangerous and safe at the same time, depends where you go. You need to know what you're doing when you're traveling, so you need to be smart at traveling. With my Israeli passport, personally, I don't have an issue because I have also a French passport because of my mom and an American passport because of my dad. But my wife has only an Israeli passport, and obviously all of what is considered enemy countries we're not allowed to go to, which I really do want to go to. I really want to go to Iran, actually, but we can't. I can go to it, but don't really feel comfortable going because they might suddenly know I'm from Israel. I might go one day. My sister just went to Indonesia with her with her American passport, just as an example. Okay, I think that was that question. I got another question about anti-Semitism, traveling the world. Interestingly enough, usually when I go to Muslim countries, the anti-Semitism that I experienced was less. Like Morocco, maybe, no, the translation is wrong. Morocco was great. Egypt, I didn't say I was an Israeli, and one time I did, it didn't end up well, really. I don't really feel anti-Semitism. It's not against Jews, I would say. I would say it's more about, oh, Israel, how's the war going on? What's going on with the Palestinians? So some people might consider it anti-Semitism, but for me, anti-Semitism, especially now after Holocaust Day, is just hating Jews because they're Jews. But with Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, usually that's what you encounter traveling the world, where people would be like, oh, but you guys are the bad guys, you're conquering the Palestinians or anything like that. And then you dive into those conversations, which we Israelis get tired of doing because that's not why we travel. We travel to usually not talk about it. It depends who and depends if we're already friends. So if I already became a friend with someone and then we dive into that conversation, then I'll educate him and I'll tour guide him more. So for me personally, I didn't really meet too much anti-Semitism. I did meet problems with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And usually my first question would be, do you support terrorism? He would say no, and I would say me neither, and you know, that's it. That's where we would end. So that's my personal experience with anti-Semitism. My wife did encounter it, but I would say it's not common that we as Israelis encounter it. Okay?
Thank you.
So I think we need to wrap up now.
Okay.
It was really incredible, Rebecca.
Okay, Shia, while I close, go get the baby if she's not sleeping.
Should I go to the next thingy?
Go get the baby.
Move the slide.
Okay. Thank you, Shia. We love you. That was so great. And thank you all for joining us. It's not too late to register for upcoming tour guide lectures. Our next lecture will be on Monday, April 27th at noon with Bus 4 tour guide, Liana Rothstein. Her topic is Masada, Western Wall, and Yad Vashem, Symbols of Destruction or Inspiration. And I personally love Liana, and she is a member of our Women's Philanthropy. She's our Israel overseas mascot of women.
Speaker as well.
She's unbelievable. We adore her in Metro West, so you do not want to miss Liana. In addition, please join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. Shabbat time in Israel for the Global Connections virtual Kabbalat Shabbat from Israel. You will receive an email later today with the information on how to register if you have not done so already. It is going to be so wonderful. Please join us. And please, as Shia mentioned, we help each other. We all have each other's backs. Please join me in making a gift to the 2020 UJA annual campaign. While money doesn't make you happy, It does help people live. We save people, we care for people, we nurture the Jewish community. It is the fastest and safest way to make a difference now. You will get a great bang for your buck. Your gift will care for the most vulnerable locally in our greater Metro West community, in Israel, and will literally save lives during the times of crisis in 70 countries around the world. Wherever Jews are, we are there. Stay safe and stay healthy, and we look forward to being together in real time, physically soon. I give all of you a virtual hug and a kiss, and I want to see that baby. Where's the baby?
Here she is.
Baby and wife.
Hi.
Hi, Yiftach.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Karma.
everyone.
Oh, that punum. Oy, delicious. I'm going to put her on a bagel and eat her up. All right, thank you, everybody. We look
Thank you
forward
for
to
coming. I was
Thank
very
you,
excited.
everyone.
Thank you for listening.
Mwah.
I hope
Thank
you
you,
enjoyed it.
Shaya. Thank you, Yiftach.
Thank you
Hi,
so much.
Karma. Lehitraot. Come visit us in Metro West.
תודה רבה. Thank you so
Tada.
much.
Bye. Beautiful. That is one beautiful baby.